Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly? Mayor Neely?
Here. Would you please join me in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're not taking citizen comments for items unrelated to the items on the agenda. This is a special meeting. We've drafted an explanatory statement to go into the voters pamphlet on Measure 3407, the general election ballot related to voter approval of urban renewal bonds. At this point, we don't have the authority to do so, and we have here the first item is to put forward an ordinance that would enable the city to do so. It's a ordinance that is declaring an emergency. That means this only passes if it this only goes forward if it passes with unanimous decision on the part of the city commission. If it does not, that ordinance still might be passed at a subsequent second reading, but we would not be dealing with this explanatory statement because it would be too late at that point. So, if in fact the ordinance does not pass unanimously, the explanatory statement is kind of a moot statement. It can't go forward because of that. Is that correct?
I think there's a difference between not having 5 votes and having to put it over for a second reading and an emergency. You don't need unanimity for an emergency. A simple majority of the commission could declare an emergency, but you couldn't do it in one day.
That's right.
One reading.
That's right. So it'd have to come back.
For what you could set another special meeting, or you could go to your next regular meeting.
Okay. So we still have the time to do an explanatory statement?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then I misunderstood something completely. So ignore everything I said, but in any case, these are 2 different items. Yeah, these are 2 different items. And we are going to, I understand what he said. There is a time limit, though, in terms of public notification on this, is there not?
You've given the adequate public notification. If you do go to a second reading, you'll have to give new public notification again.
Okay, and that has to be done within what kind of a time period? When does the
Second
explanatory...
reading, a 7-day notice.
And when is it due to the...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The explanatory statement would be due when?
It's due to September 6th to the county.
Okay, so the second reading would have to occur...
Did we meet on the 5th?
We have a regular meeting on the 5th.
At this point, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
in which case we would still have to have a second meeting in order to, a special session in order to...
No.
You could do it on the 5th and get it over there on the 6th.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's true. Okay. In any case, it's 2 items. Right now, we don't have the authority to do an explanatory statement. First ordinance permits us to do so should it pass. And then, should it pass, then we could do the explanatory statement. And so since I've confused everybody, is there any questions? Okay. With that, I believe it's Attorney Sullivan has gone ahead and provided us with a explanatory statement. We have a recommended alteration that's been put forward by...
Actually, you want to do the ordinance first.
Yeah, we want to do the ordinance
Do the ordinance first. And so with that, we're doing the ordinance first. We're going for the first and second reading, simultaneously declaring an emergency. If it passes, we do not have to come back for a second reading.
Correct.
If it passes unanimously, we don't have to
Correct.
come for a second reading. Otherwise, it would have to come for a second reading. Do I hear a motion for the first reading? First and second readings and declaring a motion.
Well, just do the first reading now.
Yeah, first reading.
Right.
And
We don't have a discussion period or anything?
You can do it either before or after, whatever
Yeah.
you'd like to do.
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead.
Oh.
On the ordinance.
Okay, I'll... I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, we won't be talking about we won't
On
talk
the
about the
ordinance only.
explanatory statement at this point. We're talking about just the ordinance itself.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
But are we going to have a discussion on the ordinance?
sure.
Okay. So I'll move that we open that item.
Okay. We could do the motion and have a discussion after the second.
Just
Have the
So,
discussion.
so we better
Yeah.
start the discussion.
Let's just, yeah.
Just do the discussion.
So, I'm going to just see, we've got, now, anybody that's on this list, please don't discuss at this point the explanatory statement. Only talk about the ordinance itself, okay, that enables us to put forward an explanatory statement. So, first of all, I'll ask Christine Kosinski, did you want to talk about the explanatory statement or about the ordinance?
It's the ordinance you
Well, I
have to
didn't
talk
know
to right now.
Right now, all we're doing is passing ordinance that would enable us to write an explanatory statement, period. Okay? And then, Kathy Hogan, do you want to talk about the ordinance itself or the explanatory statement that we have before us on the agenda? Or later, okay? With that, William Gifford, you want to talk about the ordinance itself without any reference to the explanatory statement? I promise. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford and I live in Oregon City. I just want to make the point because there has been some, for lack of a better word, dispersion cast on the city manager for even suggesting this ordinance. And I just need to make the point that I very much appreciate the Commission's following through on this suggestion because, not particularly this ordinance, if any ordinance, if any initiative measure has the least bit of question about it, I think it's imperative that the city remedy that, and apparently the only remedy is really memo of explanation. And to do that is perfectly appropriate, because if it's not done now, it'll have to be done later.
Yeah.
For any initiative, it seems to be better to be clear as possible at the beginning. We have the results of what are called unintended consequences in economic parlance that we're grappling with right now regarding water rates. There was a charter amendment, well-intentioned, and it had unforeseen consequences. And these are things that I think we're all going to be better off if we nip them early in the bud. And I certainly encourage all of you to support the ordinance that would at least give you the tool that could prevent those consequences. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments on the ordinance, discussion among the commissioners. On the ordinance, we're not talking about the explanatory statement.
On the ordinance.
Come forward, Mr. Holliday.
Dan Holliday, I live in Oregon City. Having been the purveyor of an initiative or two in Oregon City, I'm actually surprised that this little housekeeping measure hasn't come up at some time previous to this. But that's the way I look at this ordinance, that it's really, truly just a housekeeping thing. It gives the City Commission the opportunity and the ability to maybe answer some questions in an explanatory manner, and I fully support the ordinance, and I think you should pass it today.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunt.
My name is Kevin Hutt. I live in Oregon City. I'll have comments later on the explanatory statement also. With regard to the ordinance, I first just want to respond to what Mr. Gifford had to say. There was no complaint that I'm aware of coming from at least those that I'm in league with regarding the suggestion made by the city attorney that our city manager that there be such an ordinance. It was rather the manner in which the suggestion was made and statements made in support thereof that I believe are what precipitated the communications that you received complaining about that, and I think Mr. Gifford knows that very well. I only have one remark with regard to the proposed ordinance, and that is that in Section 2, it refers to the reason for emergency being declared, that there might be upcoming referenda or initiative measures arising in the next 30 days. I'd like to know what those are, because as far as I know, the only thing coming up in the next 30 days is 3-401, the light rail vote.
Where was that again? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm presuming you've read on page 2, section 2, what the
Right.
grounds for the emergency are. And I may be mistaken, but I don't believe there's anything that could possibly be coming up in the next 30 days in a city ballot. And if you're going to declare an emergency and thereby compress the period of time for public response, participation, and comment, especially when things are being scheduled at 5 o'clock on Tuesday nights when people are stuck in commutes and many people aren't able to attend, I would suggest that you ought to at least be accurate in reciting the real reasons for the emergency. The real reason for the emergency is that it's apparently deemed desirable to place an explanatory statement in the voters' pamphlet with regard to 3-407. I'd ask you simply be honest and say that. Don't say that it's because there's something you don't know about might come up in the next 30 days.
I don't know what it says. For upcoming initiative measures. I mean, we have one.
For upcoming referendum or initiative measures that may arise in the next 30 days. Is there something coming up?
It's statements that may arise in the next 30 days. So it covers it.
Authorized to prepare explanatory statements submitted for referendum or initiative measures that may arise in the next 30 days. What referendum or initiative measures that may arise in the next 30 days do you need to be properly authorized to prepare a statement for?
I don't know.
Is 3407 going to be on the ballot in the next 30 days?
I can't tell you.
You don't know when it's up for it's up for November 6th.
I can't tell the future. So, but thank you for those comments.
You don't know the date that this measure is set to be submitted to the voters on?
Of course.
We know what this
But I don't know what else there might be. I have no idea. I can't tell the future in the next 30 days.
Has the city recorder advised you that some other citizen initiative has been approved for the city ballot in November? Or have you authorized a referendum?
Thank you, Kevin.
I guess you don't want to answer my question, Commissioner.
I did answer.
You're very
You like
welcome.
it.
Reasons were given for the emergency piece. We still can proceed with the voting on the ordinance. Do we have any now? Let me just check, see if somebody else has come up on the ordinance itself.
No.
Oh, I have. I don't know what I've done here, but years I've lost my.
Kathy.
Kathy, I was going to see if there were any other citizens. Commissioner Roth.
Okay. I'm going to read a prepared statement that I wrote. I'd like to take a moment to explain my reasons for being here tonight. I'm supposed to be in Florida, beginning a family vacation. However, the importance of tonight's decision made delaying that necessary. When I ran for this office, my primary goal was to be the eyes, ears, and voice of the constituents who elected me. I take this responsibility very seriously and constantly reassess my adherence to that goal. During the last week, I have spent almost 100% of my time deliberating my responsibility to the citizens of Oregon City. I am committed. I believe that Oregon City is at the most important fork in the road that we have encountered in the last 150 years. I also believe that the decision made here tonight is critical to choosing the path that we will follow in the future. Oregon City has grown from a small company town to a medium-sized city. We no longer have, quote, the company, but other factors have taken over that position. The government of a small town was run by the city employees to provide for the most efficient way of transacting business. We are no longer a small town. It is time for a total reassessment of how we conduct ourselves in business, government, and politics. The business of the city employee is to run the business of the city, not determine the politics. In fact, state law prohibits us from mixing the two. The decision called for tonight is a pivotal point in our juncture. Our city manager has pointed out an issue that he believes to be a problem. In doing so, he is performing his job well. However, it is up to the Commission to make the final decision. We must ultimately decide if we are going to allow the city to take a side on this urban renewal issue. Oregon law provides citizen referendum and initiative. Many concerned citizens have spent weeks gathering signatures to put this issue on the ballot. As one of the signature gatherers, I can attest to the fact that every signer was given a copy of the petition and the charter amendment to read before they signed. Almost no one refused. In fact, it speaks volumes that almost 4,000 citizens signed very readily. And it's our obligation to make sure that this is given its day on the ballot. It is not the city's place to take the veiled attempt at defeating this measure. As such, I have no problem with the ordinance being proposed that would allow the city to insert an explanatory statement into the voter's pamphlet. What I do have a problem with is attaching this ordinance to any ballot measure as an emergency. The very word emergency gives the impression of dire consequences. If this ordinance is necessary, it needs to come to the Commission on its own merits. Also, I do not believe that we can come up with a neutral statement on such short notice. Neutrality is not a bullseye that we're going to hit. Neutrality has an infinite number of sides depending on from where you approach it. I spent time trying to correct the issues that I found in the explanatory statement and then ran my draft past others. They not only found issue with my draft, they found other issues in the statement. So I believe it's not something we can hit very easily. In short, it is my belief that we need to separate the ordinance from the ballot measure. Given that we don't have the time to do that, we need to stand back and let the voice and the intelligence of the voters speak. If they find issue with the measure, they will vote it down. If not, it will pass. But the invaluable lesson will be that the staff employed by the citizens will have avoided electioneering and will have respected the will of the people. We are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not a crowd of uneducated persons waiting to be told how to react. A friend recently told me the definition of a quantum leap. Simply put, it is when an electron that is in an orbit around a nucleus leaps to an orbit further away from the nucleus, but the electron never exists in the space between the two orbits. I submit that it is time for Oregon City to take a quantum leap, leave the small-town, company-run government behind, and propel ourselves into a new century. This is not exclusive of keeping with our pioneer roots or spirit. It is simply the only way that we will be able to move forward with development, prosperity, and enhancement for the new challenges facing our citizenry. Thank you.
Any other questions
Nope.
or comments? Do I hear a motion for the first reading?
I would move that we have the first reading of ordinance 12-1008
And declare an emergency?
and declare an emergency.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to make a comment.
Do we have a second on the motion?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, do we have a second? I second the motion. Go ahead.
This is extremely tough, and I think what bothers me the most is that we're not voting on the measure, and it seems that a lot of people think that our votes tonight, even though we're not voting on the measure, that they're tied to how we feel about the measure. It's
Right.
not the case really with me. I don't have a problem with the ordinance for future, but I do think it's odd that I do think that the only reason we have the ordinance tonight is specifically for this statement. So then I look at this statement. We need to, as a city, create a neutral statement. I don't know how we do that either. That's, to some degree what Kathy said. But at the last meeting we had a discussion about this, and we all voted to bring it forward, and actually that was unanimous to get to the next meeting, to have a special meeting. But at that time, I was fairly confident at that time that at least there was going to be a third party looking at the statement. And when we found out that there wasn't, or that we didn't have enough time for that, that concerned me a little bit. I'm a school teacher, and I can imagine a school bond measure, proposal being forward, and then the school district writing a response to it. You want to make sure that these are as neutral as possible, and I unfortunately think we're running out of time to make sure that it is as neutral as possible. I think it's very easy to take the statement and look at every single word and debate whether or not that word is neutral to one side or another. And I think that it's not like we didn't know that we've seen the ballot title for how many, the ballot title and the measure has been out there for a long time. Somehow no one caught that there was a problem.
Well,
and I guess I don't know as a city person how to be neutral in this decision now, because we can't get someone else to look at it. And I feel that the only reason as a city commissioner or representative of the city that I can be neutral is to abstain and not vote yes or no. And that's a horrible position to be in. But I don't think I think whatever our decision up here tonight is somehow tied to how we believe the measure should go forward, and that's not what I want to do. And I don't think that's fair to what our job is. So I'm really lost. I don't really have a problem at all with creating an ordinance to do this in the future. I think we waited to the last minute, and I don't know how we there is no way that we can get another person to look at it before it goes, because if there is,
Let me give you some background, because we did try that. I think you've seen in the correspondence I've had with you is that the Secretary of State's office would
Right.
normally do this, but because of, let's say, some difficulty in the administration of the election laws, that office took the position that it would no longer review ballot titles or explanatory statements until they've adopted some new rules, which is not going to happen in the very near future. The only other thing that I could have done and did do was to go to bond counsel, who would have to defend the position of the city if it issued bonds, and asked them to look at it. They vetted it, and what you see before you is the joint product. I think we're getting into the explanatory measure, but I wanted to tell you that
right.
we did what we could.
Any other discussion?
I'm on the floor.
Okay, go ahead. Will you be speaking to the ordinance or the measure?
To the ordinance only.
Okay, thank you.
Not to the measure, just the ordinance. I do feel this is a housekeeping item. We should have caught this many years ago. I don't know why the city of Oregon City has not done that. I understand the problem has arisen, and like Oregon City, we are always reacting instead of being proactive. This is something we should have addressed a long time ago, and as normal, we're reacting to a situation. So I think the ordinance is important to have on the books.
I guess sometimes you're driven by things that come up, and I'll go back to the water rates example, because a measure was written by there were two petitioners, as I recall, that put it forward and it passed. There was a problem that it would be all bonded indebtedness, for example, and at that point it would have precluded, if it went forward the way it did, it would have precluded issuing bonds to replace bonds that already existed, but where you could have had a lower interest rate. And that the city dealt with it at that time by putting forward an alternative measure. And I don't think the petitioners actually objected to the alternative measure, but it's too late to change it. And that was the way of dealing with that particular issue. Oftentimes we're driven by things that come up, and we discover we don't have a means of otherwise dealing with it, and that's what's triggered this process. So I guess I won't fault anybody in the past, because I guess the issue wasn't there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that very well could have been, but it
Yeah.
seems like there'd been some ordinance out there that the city could have put a explanation in the voters pamphlets for that, people could have used as a resource. So it's very unfortunate that it has to come at this time, but I do think I'm very much wanting this ordinance to be in our books for future use.
So we can go ahead with the first reading.
Okay, this is ordinance number 12-1008, an ordinance authorizing submission of explanatory statements by the city for inclusion in the Clackamas County voters pamphlet for matters submitted to the voters under the referendum or initiative powers declaring an emergency.
The vote, please.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
It doesn't matter. I'm going to abstain.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. Now, we'll have to go into a second reading at a subsequent date.
Yeah.
And we could not now take action on the explanatory statement, but we have a lot, am I correct in that statement?
You can certainly discuss it. If
That,
you wish.
no, that I understand. But people are here, I'm sure, to discuss it, and we will have a discussion, but no action would be taken.
That's correct.
No action would be taken at this particular meeting. So we had several people that actually put their names in. Do they want to resubmit their names? Okay, we have
Yeah, they're here.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you. My name's Kevin Hunt. I live in Oregon City. My remarks have already been submitted in writing through the courtesy of Ms. Ide. I appreciate it very much. Just to recap and highlight, basically, the problem I saw with the proposed explanatory statement drafted by the city attorney was not that it was replete with a lot of argumentative statements. It isn't. In fact, it's a pretty well drafted statement, in my opinion. I think I indicated and acknowledged that. The problem I have with it is in its total effect. It's the omission of certain words and certain phrases, and the way that certain phrases are repeated without connecting them to the things they're connected to, that as a whole renders this statement non-neutral, in my opinion. And I provided you with an example that is basically the statement prepared by the city attorney, and I've placed in brackets words I suggest be deleted, and I've underlined and bolded what I suggest be inserted, and I submit to you that pushes the statement back towards the center, makes it more neutral. Frankly, if I had my druthers, I would wish that you would not even go down this road that you're headed, but I'm assuming that you're going to do it anyway, and I'm assuming that that some statement's going to be in there. Therefore, I'm trying to mitigate the harm I see from that. But I submit that what I've proposed is far more neutral. It makes clear that while the measure does amend current plans, it does so only to provide that future indebtedness is subjected to a vote of the people. The statement prepared as it is by the city attorney doesn't really emphasize that latter part, and instead repeats over and over that this actually amends current plans. Now, if you take this statement that's prepared by the city attorney and you place it next to the summary statement, there's a caption, there's a question, then there's a statement that summarizes the measure. You place your explanatory statement next to that, those two things next to each other, and read them, and I guarantee you it's going to cause you more confusion. When you read the summary statement, which is accurate and neutral, it tells you exactly what's going to happen. You know whether you want to vote for this or not. Then after you read what the city attorney wrote, it suggests that maybe it's something completely different. That's why I've proposed what I've proposed. As I indicated in my writings, there's more than one way for something to be polemic and non-neutral. One is to put a bunch of argumentative facts in it, which it did not happen here. The other is simply the way things are strung together. You could string 100 accurate statements together and write the most misleading thing in the world if you wanted to. That's actually what propaganda is. A lot of people don't realize that. Propaganda isn't telling lies. Propaganda is only telling half the truth. And what we want to avoid is propaganda. You want facts. And you want it to be as neutral as possible. As I indicated, there's a lot of other accurate facts that could be placed in here that aren't in here if we want to go into all the background, and I recited those on pages 2 through 3, and I believe that some other people here are going to talk about those. So I'm not going to belabor those now. They're in my written remarks. But I strongly urge you, if you're going to go down this road, to consider the alternatives that I have presented to you. Of course, again, I would submit to you that this is simply not something you ought to do at all, because the summary statement that already exists for this measure is accurate, and there's no way somebody who reads that is going to be confused by the way the question is worded. The caption. The caption is the least informative of any of these things because it has the fewest words. The next least informative part of one of these is the question. It has the next fewest number of words. Then there's the statement. For example, you've all probably today got your voter's pamphlet. There's how 3401 set out: caption, question, statement. Then an explanatory statement was placed underneath it by the county council. I'm not going to render any opinion about whether I feel that was neutral or not, but I suggest you envision this the same way, and you look at the statement that already exists for Measure 3-407, and then you place the city attorney's explanatory statement underneath it and ask yourself, does that explanatory statement make this more clear, or does it make it more unclear to me? And I'm sure that you will find that it makes it less clear to you. It doesn't help, and that should be the test. Is omitting this explanatory statement so critical? If you were to omit it, is the situation so critical that a voter of average intelligence would not be able to understand what this measure did? I submit that the answer is clearly no. And for that reason, I ask that you not insert the explanatory statement that's been presented to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We won't be doing that tonight in any case in terms of a vote. Next person on is Christine Kosinski.
Michael.
Oh, Michael Berman, my apologies.
Michael Berman, Oregon City resident, high school class 83.
I won't tell you what my year is.
I'm still in awe of the eloquence and profound sense of sincerity and integrity with what Commissioner Roth had spoken. And as part of my 3 minutes, I'd like to have affirm what she had just had spoken of. If what I've heard tonight, and I've changed what I was going to say a little bit. What I've heard tonight is a lot of from one speaker and from a commissioner that. Gosh, it seems silly. We haven't seen this before. How obvious. Mm-hmm. But somehow we kind of plodded along through the last 20 or 30 years. So it's different. An emergency is different than something that sort of worked and plodded along. You can improve something. You could have an improvement session, but an emergency might be that one of our water towers is falling over. That's a dire emergency. I don't see a dire emergency here. And if we proclaim this an emergency, then we're shying away from neutrality, I think. just in the nature of proclaiming that this specific incident is an emergency, when the others things that throughout the last few years that we haven't had this ordinance. So we've seen to kind of plot along through that. Maybe the ordinance is a good idea. Maybe it should be implemented at some point. But to create such a dire emergency around this this thing that's upon us now, that reeks of non-neutrality. I don't think that we need an explanation either. I think that the summary should be fine. The explanation is well worded, and Kevin's is well worded. They're both they're both written by people with a wonderful vocabulary, and there are a lot of words that obfuscate maybe the message to the voter. I think that by adding such a long explanation, if it's needed at all, shies away from neutrality, and it's just too full of verbiage. So my thought was, in my message would be that we don't have an explanation at all, and if we do, that it should be shortened and it should be neutral, and neutral with a sense of detachment. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Christine Kaczynski.
Before you start my time, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm here with a short statement from myself, and I've also been asked by Barbara Rankin to read her statement since she's not here. Do you want me to do them
That's
one
fine.
after
I
the
think
other?
we can go ahead and
Or do you want
give
to
you up
recall
to
me?
6 minutes. Well, you actually were listed twice, and so you can take 3 minutes for reading her statement. And
Probably would love to recall me. Thank you.
Just don't recall me, please.
Christine Kaczynski, I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. Petition 1101, Measure 3407. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. These are the closing words of the Gettysburg Address given by President Abraham Lincoln. The good voters of Oregon City placed their faith and trust in you when they voted you into office. Each of you were elected by the people to represent them and to do their will. As an elected official, you are a servant of the people. It is sad for me to see you here tonight trying to circumvent the works of your voters, trying to find ways to once again cut the voters out of decisions that are theirs and theirs alone. I would like to remind you that Oregon City is not yours. Rather, it belongs to the people. Your residents and taxpayers to the city should have the final say and opportunity to speak up about development they would like to see in their city. And most importantly, what are the true costs for the development being proposed, as well as the amount of debt that's being accrued. The 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution prohibits each government in the United States from denying a citizen the right to vote. It is clear that the citizens have spoken by the 2,700 signatures they have gathered on their petition, Your Right to Vote on Urban Renewal Bonds. I ask that you look into your hearts and please honor their wishes and uphold what you were put into office to do, to represent the people and to do their will. They have the right to vote as given to them under the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and you've got now you got your second shot.
I will hurry.
Oh, that's fine. Your clock's reset.
I'm Christine Kaczynski. I'm speaking in behalf of Barbara Rankin, who is the chief petitioner and could not be here tonight. Speaking as one of the chief petitioners, we will we are accomplished and have accomplished an enormous feat, namely accruing signatures of more than enough voter signatures to support our basic democratic right to vote, on issues affecting city plans and bonds. As I have mentioned previously, we received overwhelming support in this effort to obtain the right for the voters of Oregon City to vote on all bonds. But in this specific measure, we are now identifying urban renewal bonds. We did not misrepresent our statement. We had documents to support our mission as required by law. Everything was approved by the city in advance. Citizens elect their city commissioners who hopefully are committed to a platform where they represent Oregon City's citizens' opinions without attempting to confuse the voters with alternative wording, ignoring the voters' intent. It just boggles the mind in an attempt to understand why Mr. Frazier is so threatened by a petition that became Measure 3-407. The city, the county, and the state of Oregon had knowledge of the petition. All validated the petition, which became Measure 3-407. I do not understand how they can back up when there are indeed periods of time to review, dissent, and or accept. There was no objection until after the fact. That is not our problem. It is Mr. Frazier's problem as our paid staff member overlooking our city. Surely this makes me wonder what else Mr. Frazier is not paying attention to, or to what he is paying attention to. I do know he's not listening to the people, the citizens who pay his salary. Seems to me the focus is about growing bigger debt and more development that allows for Portland creep without adequate funding. The citizens' concerns are about growing our city responsibly while maintaining its historic, horticultural, environmental, and pioneer spirit while taking advantage of our natural resources without creating huge taxpayer debt. And now we have an emergency meeting called, but there is no emergency except in Mr. Frazier's mind. The citizens don't have an emergency. It is hard to believe that the city does have one. Why does Mr. Frazier believe that Oregon City has an emergency? Since moving here, I have learned that I am one of many citizens in the city who would like the City Commission to represent them and not developers. Many of the citizens believe that it is not the responsibility of the city and the Urban Renewal Commission to finance private developers and their grand ideas. Look around the country and see how many cities and states are declaring urban renewal bonds for financing projects a thing of the past. In 1975, a long time ago, urban renewal was envisioned as a tool to help communities rebuild when no bank financing was available. That was then. Developers got wind of the idea, subsidizing their developments, and took advantage of it. Now those conditions do not exist, and it is over. No more. Oregon City, wake up to what the rest of the country has learned. There is something basically wrong when the city attempts to redefine a citizen's measure effectively written by the city attorney that was subsequently taken up by the citizens who gathered the signatures and achieved them legally. Barbara Rankin, Chief Petitioner, your right to vote on urban renewal bonds.
Thank you. Mr. Gifford.
Kathy Hogan.
Oh, Kathy Hogan. I don't know why I'm doing that. Kathy Hogan, please come forward.
You don't like
Mr.
me?
Gifford, you can come forward and wait. Sorry, Kathy.
I don't know how he forgets you.
I'm doing good. I would like to say I liked what Christine wrote in both those letters. Kathy, you did a wonderful job in that yours.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Kathy Hogan, live outside the city. Thank you, God. I'd be upset if this was happening to me. I mean, it's not an emergency. And what the other people said with Michael Berman, I agree with them. And I would love to know what the indebtedness of the city is right at this moment. I would like to see a printout of your budgets, what's coming in, what's going out. Is anything going to get paid in my lifetime or my grandson's or my great-grandson that was just born? I doubt it, because you can't keep using the urban renewal as a cash cow for everybody. If it's a good development, they should be able to develop it themselves. Home Depot did. And this is not an emergency. I wish you would leave comments out and be more neutral. It's a shame that this can't be done.
Mr. Gifford.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. Well, I had planned on saying a few things, but there's a few other things that need to be addressed. Let me take them in reverse order. I would be happy to loan this to Kathy. This is the city budget that I've read every 278 pages of, and if you would like to go through take the time to go through that, it might be interesting to note that the citizens do not vote on this budget. $81.4 million, and the citizens do not vote on it. That has nothing to do with the ordinance that we're talking about, but we also have a tax base that we could be applying $5.0571 dollars per thousand that we are not. We're only applying 4.159. We've got about almost 89 cents per thousand that we could be assessing without voter permission. City Commission can assess those taxes without voters approving it. I'm just saying that there are certain things that voters should approve and shouldn't approve, and for lots of reasons that I don't really need to talk about right now. Let me be the first to admit that I do not think that I am the sharpest tool in the box. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments from the peanut gallery. However,
Excuse me, if I get another comment from the audience who has somebody's testifying on their time, I will gavel it. That's his 3 minutes, it's not yours. Continue. You get another 30 seconds since I took it away from you.
When Mr. Hunt pointed out that there is no way for an average voter to be confused about the distinction between the summary and the actual wording in the charter, I think that I'm an average voter, and I'm confused. I think there's a lot of people here that are confused. So I just think it's important to realize that there are a number of us that are not all that dumb, that are confused about what the actual purposes of this measure are doing, whether it's for present, whether it's for future, whether it's for bonds, or whether it's for plans, or whether it's for projects. And without casting dispersions on the legal expertise of those that drafted this, it's not very well written. Mr. Berman talked about the ordinance, which is appropriate, which is what we're talking about. The ordinance, the fact that we plodded along for 20 to 30 years without this ordinance. Well, we've also plodded along for 20 or 30 years with urban renewal, the way it is. And if you're going to use that type of logic, I would say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ms. Kozinski's comments about voters' decisions, I'm echoing in my comments about the budget, about taxation, and about a myriad of other things that citizens could be voting on, but they don't. Why? Because you can't micromanage. It's a bad use of resources. Why should you vote on urban renewal? Oh, this is aside from the ordinance. Urban renewal bonded indebtedness is very, very different than municipal bonded indebtedness, which takes money out of your pocket, and urban renewal doesn't. And I'd be happy to defend that. The last thing that I would like to talk about is ad hominem attacks. Maybe I don't know all the big words, but I do know ad hominem, which means arguments that are attacking an individual. There have been arguments attacking our city commissioner, arguments attacking our city attorney, arguments attacking our mayor, and even individual commissioners. That type of argumentation is spurious and uncalled for. And I think that anybody that is trying to make a comment about how someone is performing in their job is not addressing the issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Holliday.
Dan Hawley, I live in Oregon City. A couple things. One, when we talk about a vote of the people and whether these things should be voted on, well, guess what? In November, we're going to have the opportunity to pick two of you or not pick two of you to come back and continue to be our representatives. So there is the opportunity to change the direction of the commission every 2 years. Enough said on that. I am personally insulted. To be honest, I disagree with William on one thing, and that is that you guys are fair game. You stepped up on your own. Nobody held a gun to your head to run for office. So, I think people have the right to say whatever they want, as far as policy and issues and all that about you folks. I disagree about Mr. Frazier, and I have been that person 25 years ago who distrusted everyone at the city, who thought that everyone was lying to me, that everything they did was wrong. But once you become involved, once you start to volunteer your time as a school board member, as a city commissioner, as a budget committee member, once you get to know some of these people, and I still have a healthy distrust of staff, and I want to have the answers, and I asked tough questions today at the water rate thing. So I still have a healthy distrust, not distrust, but maybe I'm a little cynical about it, and I want to make sure that I get the answers to the questions that I want answered. But when you start calling someone like Mr. Frazier names for no particular reason, I'm personally insulted by that. Because I do know David. Do I agree with him all the time? Absolutely not. We definitely have our differences of opinions on things, but I believe, just like all of you, he's here to do the best job that he can for the city of Oregon City, and I think it's insulting that someone would say some of the things that they said about him in earlier testimony. And the same for Mr. Sullivan. I'm not going to rant too much more. I do think we made a mistake in having Mr. Sullivan write the explanation as well as the ballot measure, as well as everything else. It seems like he's been on 6 sides of a 4-sided square on this deal, but there's really not much we can do about it now. At the end of the day, I don't have a position on this ballot measure. Okay? I'm not going to speak out for or against it. I think it goes through, and I personally think it's going to pass, and that's the way it's going to be. But at the end of the day, I also think that we have to have some level of civility in the conversations that we have.
Mr. Fowler.
Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. Just a couple things I'd like to mention and maybe clarify. This is, and I'll speak to the actual charter issue, in that it is a charter issue. That's a big deal. What concerns me is, and I agree there is a level of confusion, because when I read it, I wonder if it's referring to plans or projects, and are those urban renewal city plans or are those developer plans for the project itself. So I think there is some confusion there, and I don't mean that. I think there's some well-meaning intention on the part of these petitioners. I think that there's probably a little bit of an overreach by the city in terms of some bonded indebtedness and talking about $130 million, when in reality that's not been issued, it's not there. And so, I think there's some things that if we all just step back a little bit, we could get to a reasonable thing on some of these issues, but that's not quite yet before us. But I hope someday we might get there. But there is some confusion, and unfortunately, if this does pass, it'll get sorted out in the courts, and it's just going to cost a lot of money to do that. It's just, that's the process. What I'm concerned about is I play the game in my mind, well, what happens if it passes? Because that could be part of the reality. To me, it creates an awful lot of uncertainty still in the business community. Now, I don't know if that's the if that's the intention or not. It says, hey, we want the right to vote. It's a big decision and we want the right to vote on things. And I think that I tend to believe that in today, especially today, we live in an awful lot of an instant information world and a headline world. And I'm not putting anybody down. I think there's a lot of people have the ability to learn and listen and educate themselves. But what we do oftentimes today is we elect our leaders to lead and to sit through an awful lot of hearings and a lot of testimony and listen to the details of projects to make good decisions for us. Because quite frankly, some of us don't have that time and choose not to do that. So it's hard to take some of those factual-based decisions that might come forward in an urban renewal plan or project that you spend a lot of time on and try your very best to make decisions on, and then turn them into, and I'm not quite sure how they get on the ballot. If you guys have to vote for them to go on a ballot, and so you're endorsing them, or there's so many things about this that's so uncertain to me. Do you approve an amount of a project, and then are you showing endorsement for that project beforehand, or do you have to remain neutral in that? So I don't know quite how it gets to the ballot yet, but if it does get to the ballot, then it turns into a political decision, a political discussion. Even though it might be about money, it's still going to turn into a political discussion. So it's really hard for me to take this measure and try to put it in reality of if it passes. That's really hard for me. And I'd like a discussion about that. I really honestly want to know how the petitioners think it's going to work in reality. So to me, it may be wrapped in your right to vote, but if that right to vote, I entrust that to my leaders, and now that right to vote takes away job creation for our community, that creates an issue for me. In terms of the $130 million, it's not issues. There is no debt, if I'm correct. There is no debt currently in urban renewal. Zero. And it doesn't mean it is going to be issued. And I know every time we talk about urban renewal and payback that people talk about, well, it comes out of your property taxes, and we all pay it because it's on our property taxes. And I know that's a real hard issue to get to, but we don't pay it. It's an accounting method. It's a state law that when you have an urban renewal district, it has to be accounted for throughout the whole jurisdiction, but it is paid for in the urban renewal district. That's a one-sentence statement to a very large issue, because if it all goes away, your bottom line in your tax statement stays the same. That's the truth. So I'm kind of rambling, but I just think this has got a lot of issues surrounding it. There is some confusion. I think it's going to hurt in our job creation of our community and moving us forward, and I trust the elected leaders to make decisions for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyce.
Here primarily to support people getting to vote. I'm uncertain if I support this particular referendum fully. I think there is arguments to be made in both directions. And I think those arguments should be made and need to be made. And if this does get before the people, those arguments will have to be made. So, but people are asking to vote, and that's something that I support here. So, but at the same time, it's going to mean we need, all the arguments need to be put out there. If it affects job creation, I think our system of voting on every annexation has an effect on that as well. And so I think we need to get the issues on the table and talk about them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Boyce.
Brian Boyce.
We have one more, Mayor.
With that,
We have more.
waiting for it.
Nancy's typing it in.
Okay, Mr. Owens. You want Ms. Owens or you want to come forward? Oh, Mr. Owens, excuse me. Kitty Owens?
Kitty?
Kitty Owens?
Kitty Owens, resident, Oregon City, Oregon. I have some questions, actually. Mr. Mayor, did you guys just pass Ordinance 12-1008?
Not yet.
What did you just pass?
We had a first reading, we have to go into a second reading for it to be passed. So at this point, it's not passed, and that's why we can't take any.
What did you just pass?
We didn't. I'll let.
Took a vote.
I'll let our attorney explain.
Each ordinance has to go through 2 readings.
Okay.
They went through the first reading. They can do it on a second reading the same day if there's unanimity. There wasn't, so it's got to go over to another day for a final reading and adoption.
So you can't authorize submission of explanatory statements
Not today. Not today.
because it's not unanimous. Okay,
right.
cool. My only comment is, it seems like there is some question as to whether or not the language is neutral or ambivalent. It's not only possible to create a neutral statement, it's desirable and necessary to create a neutral statement. It's been done many, many times, as all lawyers know. If there's any question that this is ambivalent or it's not neutral as written, then please resolve the wording or leave the explanatory statement out. If you're under the gun as to time, but you can't resolve some wording, and a majority of the people, or a number of people, are unhappy with the wording, leave it out or resolve it. You've got a short period of time. I don't know if you can resolve it. Probably can, quickly. But if you can't, leave it out. That's it.
Thank you.
After this, I'm going to ask, because we don't have it here, but to have the ballot title read, and that'll probably indicate what the nature of the confusion is. Nancy Walters is listed. Are we having something read in?
Nancy Walters, Oregon City resident. According to William Lutz, the chair of the Double Speak Committee since 1975, the purpose of language is to communicate truth and to facilitate social groups getting together. Double speak is a form of language that does not communicate truth but seeks to do the opposite. Double speak is language that deliberately disguises, distorts, or reverses the meaning of words. In George Orwell's own words, largely the defense of the indefensible, and language designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. The assertion that Measure 3-407's title is defective and deceptive, and the proposed explanatory statement are classic examples of doublespeak. We are being asked to simultaneously discredit and endorse language crafted by the same city attorney paid to take both sides of the argument. The explanatory statement refers to bonded indebtedness that is authorized and permitted, yet fails to mention that it would also require approval regardless of if there's a public vote. These are clear illustrations of doublespeak and how the explanatory statement confuses rather than clarifies the effect of Measure 3-407. The purpose of Measure 3-407 is to require a public vote on new urban renewal bonded debt. The purpose has been very clear from when it was drafted in January 2011 through today, and responds to the desire for good government. Allowing citizens to vote on urban renewal debt would make a major difference in providing much-needed oversight, and is consistently recommended as a best practice first step to minimize systemic flaws and corruption scandals that are so common to urban renewal programs. We've seen far too many government scandals in recent years. Unfortunately, the current Oregon City urban renewal process is conducive to unethical and possibly illegal behavior. Projects can be negotiated in backroom deals with very little oversight. There are false presumptions that projects will pay off tax increment finance bonds when in fact they do not and should be rejected. At least one commissioner has stated that Measure 3-407 would kill economic development. In fact, financial analyses of hundreds of redevelopment agencies reveal that without meaningful reforms such as Measure 3-407, urban renewal itself kills economic development. This is why the California legislature voted to shut down all of its redevelopment agencies this year, and the state of New York has also started to do the same. Government corruption and favoritism are bad for business and communities. Those who want good government and economic development should support more urban renewal transparency and oversight through a vote of the people. This simple change would improve urban renewal projects and, more importantly, create more open and honest government. Oregon City has been subjected to a multi-generational exploitation and abuse, resulting in the Stockholm Syndrome of types of traumatic bonding between citizen volunteers and public servants that harass, threaten, abuse, and intimidate. The FBI estimates that roughly 27% of victims show evidence of positive feeling toward their captors, sometimes to the point of defending them. The true emergency we face in Oregon City is risk of Orwellian doublespeak leading to more exploitation and abuse. Rational leaders will support our community and good government by voting against tonight's proposed actions. Thank you. I also have from the John Locke Society, these are common sense TIF reforms that outline the measures that are recommended. And you'll see that the first one there is requiring voter approval on urban renewal debt measures.
Do you have one for Nancy Eyes?
Yes, I do.
Sure. Ms. Holden, you looking for him? Ms. Holden? I've got you on the list, or have you withdrawn?
Rose.
Hi, Rose Holden, on just outside Oregon City. I believe that the City Commission has an obligation, a duty, morally, ethically, to clarify every piece of information that comes out of the city. That being said, the ballot measure that is coming out for the voters of Oregon City regarding this charter amendment, when I read it, is confusing to me. The language is ambiguous. The title does not clearly state present, future urban renewal dollars. The form of the ballot title per ORS 250.035 says the ballot title of any measure other than a state measure to be initiated or referred shall consist of, and then there's A, B, C, a concise and impartial statement of not more than 175 words summarizing the measure and its major effect. There are many, many court opinions regarding ballot titles and whether or not they're valid. And I did do some research, and I do know that this one will see the court after this one, if it does pass. I ask that you do the statement, pass the emergency ordinance, and put something in the voter's pamphlet from the City of Oregon City. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would request at this time, before we have internal discussion, we're not passing anything at this point. Can we have a reading of the ballot title, please?
Ballot title has a caption, requires voter approval for urban renewal bonds. Question, shall city charter be amended so that future urban renewal plans require voter approval for bond issuance? Summary, this measure would amend the Oregon City Charter to prohibit the City Commission from approving urban renewal plans or amendments to such plans that do not require voter approval for the issuance of bonded indebtedness issued after the effective date of this measure. Said indebtedness must either be approved by the voters of Oregon City or related to indebtedness created or committed to prior to the effective date of this measure, of the measure. The measure would not affect any lines of credit, bonds, or other borrowings issued prior to the effective date of the measure. Finally, the measure would define bonded indebtedness to be synonymous with the definition in ORS 310.140 sub 3 and would not apply to borrowings of less than 1 year.
The confusion stems from future plans. I think it's a fair statement. We currently have plans, and we also have we don't have indebtedness on those plans, but we have also authorized that bonded indebtedness could occur. And that's the confusion. The fact of the matter is the measure says any bonded indebtedness coming up, whether we have current plans or not, has to go to the vote of the people. And there is a confusion between the ballot title and what the measure is. That's the only intention of this explanatory statement is not to indicate whether the city favors or does not favor this going forward. It's just to make clear that any plans, even ones that have already been approved, if it's going to require bonded indebtedness, has to go to the vote of the people. And that's what this is clarifying. There is confusion between the ballot title statement and what the measure does. And that's what we're trying to clarify. And what I'm going to read for what I think is critical. Mr. Hunt suggested alternative language, but actually what the attorney places here, I think, makes it very clear what the issue is. Seeks to affect all urban renewal plans, including those already approved and for which bonded indebtedness is authorized. So any of our plans, essentially, whether we've approved them or not, would be required to go to a vote of the people if we were seeking indebtedness for it. And we wanted to clarify the ambiguity between the title and what the measure actually does. And that's all we're doing here. It is not a pro or con statement. It is a point of clarification. We will not be taking any action at this meeting because we don't have any authority to do so at this time. Any other comments that we have? I see Mr. Edgar, go ahead and come on forward, and then I'll take other comments from the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Paul Edgar, a citizen of Oregon City. I didn't come here tonight with the intent to make any statement. I just wanted to listen to the process and all the way through. But a statement was made, and unfortunately it was made by one of the people that said that we didn't have any urban renewal debt. We owe the city right now 1.9 plus million on monies obligated by the Urban Renewal Commission, and it's reflected on our urban renewal budget document as debt. We also show in our debt on the urban renewal budget document that we still have 28 years of debt on bonds for the much of those bond funds were raised to fund initially part of this city hall. Also, we have on our debt, on our urban renewal budget document, debt that is reflected in 3.6 or 3.7, I don't remember the exact million, that's a part of a line of credit that we've got to resolve. This is debt. At this point, we've been, since the inception of 1977, of an urban renewal district, we have not been creating much TIF, tax increment, over and above from new development. We've been investing or taking a lot of money from a lot of entities. I would like to remind everyone that they could take a look at the 5 years and 10-year profiling of where our monies have come from to go into the urban renewal district and what the accumulative effect is going to be on all of the entities, taxing entities that are contributing money, which is like education, fire department, Clackamas Community College. All of these people are giving money in and expecting someday to have a payday. Currently, to the best of my knowledge, I don't see any place where we have a termination plan to terminate and actually have, in a sense, what you'll call a reset, where there is a payday that comes out to all of the entities. And in a sense, this is just literally a right to vote on the part of the citizens to determine if their value structure is consistent with what has been happening. And now that the signatures are there, it's literally not for us to intervene in any way, shape, or form. It's for the citizens to come back and make a statement. They'll make a statement at the ballot box. Literally, we should get out of the way. And that's my position, is that it's now, we had our chance. We didn't contest anything. And now it's a chance for us to step back, give the citizens away their ability to make a value judgment, and not really violate state election law. And we got to be very, very careful about that. And I just caution everyone: be careful. We're touching on the edge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have Mr. Meyer. Ms. Holbeck, if you want to come forward too, and just wait. I've been calling one person at a time, but you can come forward as well. Have a seat.
Good evening. I'm Blaine Meyer, and I'm an Oregon City business owner, actually 2 businesses, and actively involved in the city on numerous boards and organizations. I just want to say that I have read both the statements and the body of the measure 3407, and it was not clear to me. And so I just want to support the passing of the ordinance tonight. So Christine made a statement. She said, this is regarding 3407, she said that this is really about the level, about what kind of development is allowed in Oregon City. And I think that's I agree with that statement. This is not about the right to vote. It's about controlling the development, the economic development, the type of economic development that's happening in Oregon City. This charter amendment change was attempted before. The exact wording was attempted before. And I think this is, again, another end run around our elected officials to control the agenda. And I just don't think it's a great way to make decisions. You know, if it were a good way to make decisions, you know, corporations the shareholders, they vote for their board of directors, who weigh in on very complicated financial issues and make their decisions on behalf of shareholders. If it were the best model for decision making and governance, you know, we could just institute SurveyMonkey. Forget you guys. And just take polls whenever we, approve a budget, review salaries. We'll just take a poll. It's not a great way to make decisions. I'll leave it at that. I support you folks. We've elected you, and we expect you to do your due diligence and make good financial decisions for us. And so we support you and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Solveig.
Thank you. Good evening. Amber Holbeck. I do represent the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just reside outside of city limits. This evening, I'm asking more questions than I have comments, and you may find a need to redirect, so bear with me. As I've read the summary and the explanatory statement, I have, and I've heard this from other speakers, still more questions, and that is an uneasy place to be as we look toward the election. I guess my first question is, what is the legal definition of created, like plan? I think the word is indebtedness created or committed to.
Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan, incidentally, is not an urban renewal attorney, but he'll still try to probably make an attempt at it.
Indebtedness created or committed to.
Created indebtedness may well speak to the authorization for bonding. Committed indebtedness is when the bonds are sold or when there's a written financial commitment that will have to be supported by some financial instrument such as a bond.
So in our downtown North End urban renewal plan, the existing plan that was passed a couple years ago, how much of that is currently created or committed to?
I do not know, but what I will tell you again is that difference between bonds that are authorized but not issued and bonds that have been issued or for which there are written financial commitments. Under the measure, bonds that are issued or written financial commitments must be paid regardless.
Correct.
However, there is this gap between the amount of money that has been authorized but for which bonds have not been issued, which would be subject to the charter
passage of-
provision. That's correct.
Okay. What do we recall what goal we're on of all of the urban renewal plan?
Sorry.
Meaning, of the urban renewal plan, there are certain projects that we had lined out. How many of those projects are we on? How many have we accomplished?
Not that many.
Well, in terms of the indebtedness we've had, Mr. Edgar referred to a line of credit that was for one of the projects. That's been, I don't think that line of credit exists anymore, is that correct? I mean, other than the indebtedness, we can't draw on it anymore.
You're probably $100 million away from reaching your maximum commitments.
Right.
Or more.
And then we have the indebtedness that's paid through the fleet fund on the City Hall.
Sorry, repeat that, please.
The indebtedness on the City Hall paid through the fleet fund of the city.
Thank you.
That is I should say the borrowing occurred through the fleet fund. That has to be paid back to the fleet fund.
Okay. Just last, I do appreciate your help in defining some of those pieces. And last but not least, I think it is very important. I think it is the only responsible thing for a city and its commission to do, to offer an explanatory statement. I would be hard-pressed as a voter, and I vote every single election. I don't think I would pass anything that does not have an explanatory statement. And I think that's an important piece, because to me, that tells me there is somebody in the middle that's offering an explanation of what the true effect is. But that also bears incredible responsibility on your shoulders, and I know you're already feeling that kind of pressure. Incredible responsibility that it is, to the T, 100% clear. Truthfully, I don't know that we're there. So I'm sure that the folks in this room are happy to assist in whatever way we can, but I think that you folks with legal staff, you're about the only ones that can do this at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any comments from the members of the commission? We're not taking any action.
I have a couple.
Okay.
Okay. I've listened to the testimony. First of all, this is going to the ballot. There's nothing that's going to stop it from going to the ballot. The only issue before you is whether or not you want to do an explanatory statement. That's the sole issue. Mr. Hunt is the only person who bothered to take the time to write something in the alternative. And while I respect it, I do have some issues with it. I want you to know it before you start your own deliberations. This does not only cover future bonds. It covers those bonds that are authorized but not yet issued. I think Ms. Holbeck made that point. That gap has not been explained, in my view, in Mr. Hunt's alternative. So the one issue I would have with him is that it does not deal with the present effect of the charter amendment, and that's Part B in the material that you have. There are differing views, mainly because bonded indebtedness is thrown all around, and it doesn't make the distinction all the time between those bonds that have been issued and those bonds that have been authorized. If there's a need, and that's up to you to make that decision, for an explanatory statement, it's to deal with that gap. Okay? Quite frankly, I don't see a lawsuit here. because nobody's going to issue bonds, and therefore there's not going to be a suit on bonds. Bond counsel, given this language, will not sign on the dotted line, and he or she has to do that for the bonds to issue if there's any question over the repayment. That was the issue in the water bonds matter. It was that it would interfere with the contract because of a charter amendment that was adopted which purported to deal with all bonds issued and unissued. That's why in this charter amendment, those bonds that are issued or ready to be refinanced are exempt. Also, any contract entered into is exempt from the prohibition. But what isn't said is that it covers those bonds that are authorized but not issued. A couple of things. The statement was made 6 ways from a statement. Your commission authorized a language for a charter which it ultimately didn't adopt. I'm there to defend that language because you asked me to write it and people took it out, and I'll defend that language. And that language does say that if the bonds are not issued and there are no written commitments, then it is subject to a popular vote. Vel non. Okay? You can't go back and redo the ballot title. I'd love for it to be able to be done and to revise it. It happened. It was unchallenged. We are stuck with it. And either you write an explanatory statement or you go to the voters with what you have. And that's all. And that's the stark choice before you. And I'm not going to live or die by the language that I prepared for you. I do think it is neutral. I do think it does the explanation. You've got to set out why you're doing the measure at all. That's what the first paragraph does. The second paragraph deals with what the effects are. And then the third paragraphs deal with the exemptions and the definition of a bond. I've tried to be dispassionate. I've tried not to favor one side or another. I run it by bond counsel. I tried to run it by the Secretary of State's office, but they won't respond. So you either do something like this or you don't do anything. And you should figure out what you'd like to do, whether you want to go to a second reading, and if you want to deal with the language. It would be helpful, since if you do go to a meeting the day before this is due, that you have a pretty good idea of what you want. And you may want to meet before the 6th to deal with that, if you are going to do this. It is very difficult doing this by committee. Mm-hmm. And that's why I spent as much time as I did trying to put this together to get you a neutral statement.
Okay, Commissioner Mum.
Oh, gosh, where do I start? I just made a few notes here. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. This will go before the voters. Everybody will have a right to vote on this. A couple of things that I want to make sure that everybody understands, that we all represent the people of Oregon City. It may not be your point of view on this issue, but we all represent the people of Oregon City. Oregon City does belong to the people, which includes us. And I want to do a little history. January of 2010, when Commissioner Roth and I were sworn in, it was asked that we have a work session on putting this particular topic before the voters. And we were supposed to have this work session. This summary was supposed to be part of our work session. It was not going to end up like it does today. We were supposed to be discussing it at our work session. In fact, as I recall, I asked, why did we spend money to have this? We could just talk about it, but here we are. It was produced, and our city attorney wrote it for our work session. I feel I cannot neglect the citizens of Oregon City by not putting in an explanation. The word future in the title tells me that it does not involve any current. It does not involve the $130 million that we could bond out. It tells me future, from this point future, okay? So I want to make that very clear. It's very confusing. Let's see, what else do I have to say here? I think that our city staff does do a very good job. We don't have, and you can talk to many of your urban renewal commissioners. Mr. Ager there in the audience will tell you we don't have a conspiracy theory going on for urban renewal. So we're not talking behind closed doors or anything like that. Commissioner Roth, I'm sorry, I didn't get the draft that you had proposed. I don't know if you didn't send it to me or what, but I didn't see the draft that you had proposed for an explanation statement for the voters pamphlet. So I apologize. It would be nice to have seen that. When this first came up, I want you guys to know that this was tabled by the commission for future discussion. So I just really want you guys to understand that we are all here trying to do the best job we can for our citizens of Oregon City, in which we all live and in which we all are a part of. So I look forward to all your future emails. And Kevin, thank you for putting all your work on that. I appreciate that. Send me an email. Thanks.
Commissioner Pauly.
Yes, I'm just so pleased to see everybody here, and I think that this discussion is needed. I think it's good, and I think that's the whole point, is to facilitate discussion and participation. I think when things are clear for voters, they participate more, and I think that is the whole intention of this, is for voter participation. If they're not clear on it, if it doesn't make sense, I know myself, I've used explanatory statements many times as either a jumping off point for more of my research in how to vote, or just to kind of explain in layman terms. And that's really what I feel I'm all about, is trying to explain things to people in layman terms, so we can all understand it. We're all in this together. I feel there's been a lot of assumptions made. We're talking about urban renewal. There's assumptions that if you're in favor of explanatory statement, that you're not in favor of this. Nobody's ever really asked me how I feel. They're assuming. And when assumptions are made, communication really breaks down. I think it's important to look at this objectively. I'd be very saddened if this overshadowed the whole, idea that people are getting to vote. And I think we really need to work together. The arguments will get made. I've heard so much talk about, urban renewal for and against, but this discussion really is about making things clear for the voters. There is no, measures aren't edited or screened to make sure they're legible. They're just there. And so I feel it's our responsibility to make sure that they are legible, that they do make sense. How can you vote if you don't understand it? Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Smith.
What I've been struggling with is it's hard to write an explanatory statement for a measure you don't understand. Or not everyone fully understands. I definitely am not opposed to submitting a statement. My concern has always been to make sure it was a neutral statement. I wish I would have gone with Betty's recommendation at a prior meeting to have a third party look at this. I did not do that. I did not speak up for that because we had a city manager who referred to our attorney to have this checked by the state. We didn't find out till later that they weren't going to do that. And so I still would like to see someone else look at this besides the people in this room. I don't know if that's possible, but it seems to me that maybe it is possible with my understanding of how the next meeting would be. So I guess I would ask the commission, is that something that we want to do now? There's been some debate within our own attorneys about this, and that has concerned me about how to create a statement to explain something that we can't explain.
I would be very much in favor, and you're right. I did forget to bring that up. That last meeting, I did ask for a neutral attorney to write this explanation. So I would be very much in favor of doing that. I don't know if
I'm not necessarily saying for them to rewrite it. I'm just saying someone needs to look at it.
Yeah.
That's my personal feeling.
If in fact there is disagreement
If it
between
comes
our
to us.
attorneys, can you elaborate on that, Mr.
I think
Silver?
I cleared that. Yeah.
There was an issue over the word future.
Future.
And when Bill looked at this, Bill Kabizman, my colleague, I was out of the office, said all urban renewal plans are now amended. So all of this is future.
All of it's future.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand, but
Right.
you're limited to so many words.
Right.
Yes.
And
So that's the word future is even.
I guess that from that standpoint, I think it's still being clarified in this particular statement. We do. I mean, we've had one attorney take a look at it and voluntarily, without request.
Right.
It's
I
like
do
putting
feel,
a lot of doctors in the same
I
room.
know.
They'll come up with something different.
Right. That's right. And I guess I think our attorney's statement on the second paragraph, I think, is the one that I would go for, because it really calls forth what the confusion is. Seeks to affect all urban renewal plans, including those already approved for which bonded indebtedness is authorized, perhaps with a additional statement, but not committed, or whatever term needs to be to indicate we haven't bonded it. But other than that, I don't have any difficulties with our attorney's statement. I do not think it shows any bias. I don't think it just clarifies the question of what future means, from my standpoint. So it's a question of, do we want to have another meeting to discuss the explanatory statement additionally before we see it at the city commission meeting, or city commission meeting? Do you want to call another special meeting ahead of time?
So what would be the purpose of the special meeting?
Well, if people feel that our attorney's statement needs to be clarified further, then we don't want to go into our next commission meeting if we think there's some alternative language of it.
Right. So I guess one attorney did submit some things. I don't know. Is there another neutral party, League of Oregon Cities, that you could?
you can probably find elections counsel. One of the things I tried to do when this thing first came up is the League of Oregon Cities has a city attorneys association, and there is nobody handling elections.
Okay.
Nobody, no subcommittee. I'm on land use and a few others, but nobody's doing elections. I can find it, and I can make a recommendation to the manager. I'll give 2 or 3 names.
Okay.
The question is, do we have a special meeting, assuming that there's additional wording that's being recommended or concerns, do we want another special meeting to discuss those before we make a decision at a regular commission meeting?
And then it goes right to the voters' pamphlet. Is that what you're saying?
You have to
No, you have to adopt the ordinance.
You have to finish.
We have to
We
finish
have
the
to
ordinance.
finish the ordinance.
We have to finish the ordinance, and then we can act upon the, should we choose to do so, act upon the explanatory statement. We need another special meeting. I'm asking the commission. If we're going to have it reviewed, it seems to me, and
Yeah.
if there's going to be edits, we should have a special meeting to
Mayor,
take
can
a
I
look
ask
at
for
that.
clarification
Yeah.
on what's being sought to be reviewed by this other attorney, by another attorney? Is it the statement, the explanatory statement that you
Yes.
want reviewed?
For me, yeah.
For, to determine its legal neutrality?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be correct.
And that's all that you're going to be asking them to do? So
Yes.
I'm thinking that wouldn't take a lot of time once we have someone
If-
get it to them.
If we have suggestions, shouldn't we get those to
Sure.
you, though?
Oh, yeah,
We have to do
absolutely.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually think, I mean, there are lots of good attorneys in Portland, but I think this is one of those situations where you probably do need to try to find someone who's experienced with elections
Yes.
and trying to determine neutrality under the law.
Well, I would like to suggest that we tentatively set a special meeting where we look at any alternatives that are presented before us, so we can have that discussion prior to going to our city commission meeting on the first.
What
Wednesday.
date would we have available?
The special meeting is, or excuse me, the next commission meeting will be on the 5th of September. That's a week from tomorrow. And we've got a holiday in there, so just logistically, I'm looking at it here.
Yep.
You could possibly have it Friday, but I don't know if it would
could
make
probably
sense
do
to
one-
have it next Tuesday, the day after Labor Day.
Do we have a requirement of posting it so many days in
Just
advance?
24 hours.
I mean, is anybody going to take an extra day for Labor Day? You won't be here, I guess.
Right. Well, Nancy, I had a question too. I read something about a minimum and a maximum for posting. There's a
For a
maximum.
special meeting, no. 24 hours for a special meeting is the.
But
I'd have to look it up to see exactly what it says.
Our
but-
charter, there's a 48 hours in there somewhere.
Okay, we
It
can
can't
look
be
it
any
up.
further out than 48 hours.
All we would need to do would be to post it within whatever that period of time is. I thought it was 24 hours.
And so, I mean, we could make that decision right now if we wish. For Tuesday. I think we would not have time. I don't think we would have time. I'll come to him, but I'm just responding to the dialogue that's going on here. I don't think we would have time to have somebody review it by Friday and have a special meeting by Friday.
You're probably right.
And so Tuesday is not Labor Day.
No.
I mean, it is, people will be working and so forth.
Mayor, I don't want to make any assumptions, so I want to ask another question if I may. So if the next attorney that reviews it concludes that it's not neutral, then I would imagine very quickly you'd want to have that next meeting. The city attorney would have to rewrite the statement, or the new attorney would rewrite the statement, and you would have another meeting right away. If the new attorney concludes that the statement is neutral as it's written, then is there a need for?
No,
another-
I think we should
Okay.
set the slot and actually do the posting of the meeting.
Just to be
And-
sure.
'Cause we
and
can
if
always cancel.
We can always cancel the meeting. So does everybody agree that we will
Right.
post for a meeting on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, yep.
And what time? This time block work? 5?
I'll have to check the calendar because there's other meetings that we have to work around. So
Okay.
it'll be evening, late afternoon or evening.
And all we'll be doing at that meeting is sorting out what language we would want on the executive, on the explanatory statement here. We would not take action on it on Tuesday because we would not have an
Correct.
ordinance in place
Correct.
to do so.
Yes, we'd have to wait till Wednesday
Okay.
for the ordinance.
So, just to clarify, I want to make sure that we're only looking at the text of this one.
Yes.
We're not opening this up for all sorts of versions and then
No.
having a discussion about what
That's
parts
correct.
of it work or don't work. I just
No.
want to know that this one's neutral.
That would be
all I
my
wanna
desire.
know.
That
That's
would
the one you're holding
showing
up
the
as-
edited version there, I think. Or is that?
No, that's his.
That's my edits.
That's
Oh, those
his.
are your edits. So that's actually our attorney's statement. Okay. Yeah.
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 Yes.
Our attorney's
Right.
statement, I just want to have someone else. That's
Look
it.
at it. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
So who do we send our edits to? Nancy?
No, we shouldn't be sending edits to anybody. It's not, that's what I was just trying to clarify. We don't want a committee creating this document. All we need to do is find out if this is neutral by someone else besides our attorney. That's all.
Okay, but if it's not?
If it's not, then
You're going to have to
we
edit.
don't put it in, or, well,
My guess
we're
is
not
that
going to edit
if
it.
the attorney finds that it's not neutral, they're probably going to say why.
Yeah,
And
and then we
point
go
to
from
the
It's not
defects.
something we're going to edit.
If any member of this commission feels there's ambiguity or there is the impression of it not being neutral, I would suggest putting your comments to the city manager and who is ever doing the reviewing can take that into account.
Okay.
But I'd rather not be in the position of us wordsmithing.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So so are you
I
okay
think
with
we're on the
that?
same page, I hope.
Okay. And do you think you can get on speakerphone on this, or will you?
I think
feel-
so.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Smith, I think anybody else have anything else?
I'm done. I'll put it on.
With that, it was just these two items we discussed, and commission meeting is closed.